Hey everyone, welcome back to the 235 Film Podcast. This season we are exploring 10 classic sci-fi films from the 20th century, and today we are taking on a Soviet masterpiece, Andrei Tarkovsky's 1972 space art house film, Solaris. Tarkovsky happens to be a godfather in the theater of cinematic history, influencing countless directors like Kubrick, Von Sant, Nolan, and Garland, to name a few. His work blurs the line between poetry and film, and he paints beauty into every frame as if he were an artist standing in front of a blank canvas. The subject of this episode is no exception, and boy oh boy were we excited to talk about it.
Boy, oh boy with the boys. Da boys.
Hey, Brant.
Hey, J-Wall.
How you doing?
Pretty good. I'm in my new office space here, which is actually just my sister-in-law's old bedroom. So
well, there you go.
There you go. But it's nice. For those viewing online, I've got all of her decorations still up here. Those are all photos of her. Yep, it's good.
It's a nice little cozy space there.
Very cozy. I got one wall designated for myself, and I got my Blu-rays on the right, my Legos on the left, and I got everything I need right here.
Oh, that's funny. So, yeah, I mean, I'm in my living room, so it's a little bit echoey because it's kind of a open space, and the kitchen's open as well, so
open floor plan. Yeah. No, it's great.
Cool. Dude, we watched Solaris this week. Yeah.
We absolutely did.
We did.
I don't know about you, but that was my first dive into Tarkovsky's work. Actually, that was my first glimpse into Soviet era film in general.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I hadn't done, like I hadn't, and one of my coworkers at my previous job was a big, like he was a big Russian fanatic. Like he studied Russian through college and all of this stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
And like
that's a hard language.
Yeah, it's a tough language. And I've dipped into it once or twice because you're around somebody long enough and you start to want to learn Russian if they speak Russian. You know what I mean? But yeah. So he was always talking about Soviet era film. And like I was intrigued by that, and the only name that would come to mind when I would think of like Soviet era cinema is Andrei Tarkovsky. Yeah. But
he's certainly the biggest one for sure.
Yeah, I mean seeing his work just in this one format is just breathtaking to me. I mean, it's nuts.
You mean like in this film, which is with Solaris?
Yeah, exactly. And then like seeing this and now being intrigued because I was intrigued by Tarkovsky, but I never did the research. But like seeing Solaris or whatever it is,
Solaris,
and doing the research on things like Stalker and Nosferatu, he was a part of, right? And
was he? I don't remember.
I believe so. The Mirror.
I didn't know that.
Like all of those things, like. And I said this about Parasite the same way, but there's certain things doesn't matter what language they're speaking. Like the concepts and the themes and the storyline that the filmmaker's trying to convey is going to cross all the way across those language barriers. You know what I mean? Like there's some stuff like kung fu movies and things like that don't necessarily translate the same way or hit the same way because of the language barrier. You know what I mean? But there's stuff like like I went to Parasite and saw it and watching Parasite, honestly, I could have watched that movie deaf and gotten the same impact I got from it with subtitles on. You know what I mean? Like no subtitles, I still completely understood the concept. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think that's something to be said about the filmmaker that it's not just spoken word that's driving the story as much as it is what's taking place on screen and in us emotionally. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I probably have to agree with you pretty much throughout the entire thing there. This is not my first time watching Solaris. And it's not my first time watching obviously, if it's not my first time watching Solaris, then it's not my first time watching a Tarkovsky movie.
One would argue, yes.
This is not the only Tarkovsky movie I've watched. That's what I'm trying to say. So I've seen Stalker and I've seen this, but I haven't seen any of his other films. and I really want to. I've been wanting to for a long time, but I always find like some kind of excuse. I'm really contemplating opening up another account with the Criterion collection, so I could watch it because they got their streaming service, and I'm pretty sure they have most of his films on there. At least they have this and Stalker for sure. But yeah, it's funny because I saw Stalker first, and then I watched this, and it felt a little bit like Walk Back. Not that this movie is any bad.
This felt like a walk back?
Yeah. This felt like a bit of a walk back. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Tarkovsky also believes that this is his weakest film.
Oh, really?
Which I can't really talk to because I haven't seen all of his films. But he believes that this is his weakest film. And it's interesting because I don't see this movie as weak in any sense of the word.
But like I kind of piggybacking off of that, I read some like not necessarily interviews with him because it's hard to find an interview that someone had with him.
Right.
But there's a lot of stuff that's like through the grapevine or I was friends with him and this is what he was saying, you know.
There's a lot of interviews with his past cinematographers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And he's like super hard on like judgment on not only his own work but other people's work as
art
well.
Itself,
yeah, exactly. He's very comparative. He it's almost as if
he hated 2001.
I know, and I kind of picked up on that too, and I'm sure you read the same article that I did, but like reading that and thinking about it, like he said he hated it, but then at the end of that it kind of came back to the fact that he just understood that it was the two things that completely separate the two films are like one could sit, and some reviewers did sit and say 2001 and Solaris are comparable on almost all planes. And as far as like that, that art house feel, like that kind of like enigmatic, like kind of stand on its own genre almost, like 2001 and Solaris, I would put Drive maybe in that category, have this kind of like
interesting
like this almost ethereal kind of feel to them, you know what I mean? Like this out of body feel almost. But 2001 is driven by the evolution of technology and science is its driving factor, whereas it's almost as if science takes a back seat in Solaris, and what takes a front seat is human emotion. And
human emotion, there's like even this mystical element to it too.
Right.
They don't really.
I was thinking
it seems like they don't really try to science the crap out of this film at all.
No,
it doesn't feel like it at all.
And I think if they did, it would ruin it. Like
I'm sure the novel, because it's a Stanislaw Lem.
I couldn't figure out how to pronounce it. Stanisław Lem or whatever.
Yeah, Stanisław Lem, I think. Lem, I think is his name. Anyways, we could debate how that's pronounced all day because I don't know. But
we need my Russian friend on the phone to
that's
tell
true.
us.
Call him up. Although I think he was like Hungarian or something, or
Ukrainian.
Czech.
Czech. Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
He was from Czechoslovakia. Anyways, I'm pretty sure his book has a lot more science behind it, just like Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 had so much more science behind. I'm not saying that Kubrick did have a lot of science there, but Arthur C. Clarke really went into the details. So I'm sure that this is the same case here. But I agree with you that the human emotion and the human element of in Solaris is so much more in the forefront of this film than it was in 2001. I mean, even in like small minutiae with like not even that small really, because you're getting a lot of background on these characters, and you don't get that at all in 2001. Right. We don't know where Dave came from. We don't know what his family was like. You know, all that stuff. So,
I want to venture out and say that Kubrick was intentional in that. Now.
Right. I'm not knocking him at all.
No, I know, but I want to say that. But then at the same time, like, and I said this to you, I see things like Solaris, and then I question all other like like Western cinema. Like I think I watched this and I'm like, oh my gosh, have we been doing it wrong the entire time?
Well, that's another thing I noticed because I was reading an article, I think it was on the Criterion website if I'm not mistaken. I read so many articles in the last week that I have no clue where they're all from. But it basically like kind of giving the difference between Western and Eastern like film, and like especially in that era with the Soviet Union and like the space race and all that stuff. So like almost 100% this film was made like it had some sort of a budget because of the space race.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if it wasn't for the space race, they wouldn't have made this film most likely, or at least not to the capacity that they did. And it's interesting too because I don't believe that if 2001 hadn't come around, we wouldn't have gotten this film.
No.
And not only that, but I think because Andrei, I don't know why I'm on a first name basis with him right now.
Andrei. Yeah. You and your buddy Andrei.
If Tarkovsky hadn't watched 2001 and if he hadn't disliked it so much, I don't think he would have wanted to make this film.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah. It's funny because he... And back to that article about the West versus the East. In the West, everything's very dazzling and very like picturesque and very beautiful and very like precise is what I'm saying. Not that the East isn't beautiful, because for sure, I mean, there's so much beauty in this film. I mean, that opening, that whole like first 20 minutes of the film is just so picturesque, so like it looks really like a painting. I mean, that imagery, the opening imagery with the reeds underneath the water, like so gorgeous. So definitely, that's not to say that the East doesn't have stuff like that, like beauty in their films, because they certainly do. And I feel like especially with Tarkovsky's work, it almost feels like this is kind of weird, but he almost feels like a filmmaker with a filmmaker poet with a paintbrush. It's like three different arts in one. It almost feels like.
That makes sense to me. But yeah, I mean, I agree. That whole like the whole beginning montage. Now it's funny you say that because there were certain parts of this that I had to like. It's a long film.
It's
3 hours long.
I think it's longer than 2001 by like 9 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, it's long, but that's intentional.
Totally intentional. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No.
But when I was watching it this time, I've watched it before, but it was like almost 10 years ago, and I remember loving it. But as I was watching it this time, and for the first like hour, I was like, "Oh, Brant's not gonna like this, I don't think." And I was like, and I was questioning myself, like, do I like this?
Yeah. And see, that's the position the film holds for everybody. I think I think that I was reading something from the Chicago Tribune. I think it was Roger Ebert who talked about this film specifically, and he said like,
rip in peace, by the way.
Right, rip in peace for sure. But he was like Solaris isn't for a major audience. It's for the singular person. He said like this film, Tarkovsky had no specific pointed direction for how it was supposed to hit. It's supposed to hit every single person differently. And it echoes where we are currently in our life, in our emotional state, because of the emotional weight that Solaris carries. Like you hate it, you love it, you like it, that's on you. But even deeper than that, if it comes to a point where you like or dislike this film just like that, then you're missing the point of it.
No, it's got something to say for sure. And it doesn't matter who you are. You can definitely pick something in there that can speak to you.
Yeah. It's interesting to me, like obviously the space race is driving this, but it's like, you think about like late 20th century America, Soviet Russia, like their ideologies. Yeah, we got there. Ideologies of what space looks like and entails is like, on like a serious side of that, like they must have been scared out of their minds to go to space. Like,
oh, that's interesting.
Like it seems like everyone's iteration of space travel is like the most daunting thing I've ever seen.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting that you say that. the reason I find it interesting is because I was reading Kurosawa actually wrote an article about Solaris because he went to Moscow to watch a screening of Solaris with Tarkovsky. And a couple years earlier when they were, or a year earlier or something like that, they were shooting Solaris. And again, Kurosawa was in Moscow while he was shooting. And there was like this little event going on and both directors were there. And it was the first time that Kurosawa met Tarkovsky, and he describes him as like this little man, very fragile.
Yeah.
But he wasn't aware that he was so.
Right.
Like that he was that. But that they were talking, and then Tarkovsky excuses himself and says, "I still have work to do," and he walks away. And he didn't know, and Kurosawa had no clue where he went. And apparently, a couple minutes or maybe an hour goes by, and he hears this loud explosion that shakes the room, shakes the windows. And one of the producers, I think, from the film came to Kurosawa, or was like talking to Kurosawa at the time, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry, that's just Tarkovsky shooting a rocket."
Shooting a rocket?
Yeah, and he was filming the scene where the rocket, where Kelvin, Chris sends his first guest, I guess,
right,
out into space. So that's so funny to me. But Kurosawa says that like later he went and watched a screening, and he said that it's a very long film. He was talking specifically to the critics of the film, because a lot of the critics at the time were saying it's too long, it's too slow, and he was like, but that's so intentional, and if that wasn't there, we wouldn't have the full depth of what this film has to give us. And he said that at the end of the screening, Tarkovsky stands up, Tarkovsky looks at him, and Kurosawa is like, "This was wonderful. I was so afraid."
Yeah.
And that was like, and Tarkovsky took that as like this like medal, like this award that he had received from this this filmmaker,
right?
This I guess his colleague of his, right? So when you say fear, like they must have had like this fear about space. Well, I could totally see that. I could see that.
I mean,
also the way they paint space is so different than like say 2001.
Right, exactly.
Like I think it was Tarkovsky that famously said that let's make our spaceship like a breaking bus, like a disorderly bus, like a break that was breaking apart.
Right.
So when you look at 2001, everything's so spotless, everything's so clean. Like there's so much white in all the rooms. Everything's so like just spot. Everything's just perfect, right, in pristine condition.
Yeah.
And then you walk into Solaris, or I don't even know if Solaris was the actual space station, was it? No, Solaris was the planet. Yeah. But they walk into the space station. First time he comes in, and everything's in disarray. Right. Everything like you see all these exposed wiring on the walls.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like their version of space in the 60s and the 70s was disorientation. Like
totally.
Like you go to space. That's great, but understand it's a guarantee that you're going to lose your mind up there. And like you're going to experience which I mean it's probably true, but like I don't know. We're talking about 3 scientists that went to Solaris, and part of it
was a skeleton crew that had been there for years.
Yeah, exactly. And he gets there, and everyone's completely disoriented. One's committed suicide, and obviously the effects of the ocean is the reason for that. All of these unwanted visitors, almost in like an It Follows type of way. Like these people, no matter what happens, like they continue to just kind of crop up. Which you and I have spent the last 20 minutes of this episode talking about just the director and his intentionality behind the work, and we have yet to even dive into the storyline, which I think is incredible. True. I think that someone should put that entire sentence on a medal and give it to Andrei, your good buddy.
I don't think we could do that anymore.
Well, I'm sure there's some sort of like mausoleum or something we could.
Maybe he'll be the visitor if anyone ever goes to Solaris.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean.
Sorry, I said visitor because I had watched a remake, and in the remake they called them visitors, not guests, and in the original it's guests. So that's funny. Go ahead.
The remake was George Clooney's visitor his ex-wife?
Yes. Yeah. Same. That story is pretty much the same. The only difference is that she takes pills as like her form of committing suicide. She takes pills.
I see. Yeah.
And in this one, she takes like she injects herself with some kind of poison.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. This whole film, it's really weird too because I'm sometimes I get things mixed up. But okay, so you didn't watch the remake, correct?
No.
Okay, so when I first watched the remake again years ago, I thought it was terrible compared to the original. And watching it this time, I have like a new appreciation for it. It's not bad.
Dude,
It's
that's
not
what
bad whatsoever.
Roger Ebert said too. He goes,
"Oh, really?"
Yeah, he goes, I watched Solaris. It's a masterpiece. Steven Soderbergh tried to remake it in 2002, and don't get me wrong, it's a fine film. Like I'd go watch it, but obviously the original hits a lot harder than the remake would.
Oh man, it's really good. It's a lot different too. It's a little bit more what we were just talking about, like how the spaceship is in disarray and all that kind of stuff. That you don't really see that as much in the remake.
Sure.
And again, Steven Soderbergh actually says that he didn't remake Tarkovsky's Solaris. He wanted to come back to the original source with the book and do more based off the book. And like I think he even said it was like a mix of 2001 and the book or something like that, which that's a little bit of a downer because I don't think these two films correlate too closely together as far as like these two original works. So I feel like that's him just kind of like putting a Band-Aid on like I'm making a sequel to Solaris.
I mean, think about it. If you and I hadn't seen Solaris beforehand, read anything about it, and we watched Solaris in 2001.
That's the 2002 Soderbergh version? No.
Solaris and 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, okay.
The originals.
You're talking about the originals, yeah.
I think that just a surface level moviegoer would say like, wow, that felt a lot like 2001 because of not necessarily because of the story, but because of the feel that it's projecting on us. You know what I mean?
There is a sense of mystery to it still. There's that slow
Kubrick does the
pace.
same. Yeah, exactly. That slow pace, those long drawn out cuts to build that pressure in us. Like, and we'll come back to that after this segment of their show, but go ahead. You were talking about how Soderbergh was trying to meld the two almost together.
Oh yeah. And you can kind of feel that because there is that sense of just like cleanliness with the spaceship or the space station in Soderbergh's version. And also there's a lot of blues. Like it's very like spacey. Yeah. Like the Solaris itself, I keep saying Solaris itself is like this like so in the original, Solaris is this ocean planet, right? Like it's covered in ocean, and which is funny to me because that feels like, did Christopher Nolan kind of take that like in Interstellar when they go into that planet,
right? Potentially,
it's just I feel like Christopher Nolan must have had some kind of inspiration off of Solaris.
Solaris doesn't have any sort of.
There's no land or anything until the end.
It just then started to develop islands, is what they were saying.
Yeah, towards the end after they shot it with radiation or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, totally. Like, so in Soderbergh's, we never see like Solaris like up close. Never go into Solaris. We see Solaris from like space, and it looks like if you were to see a picture of Neptune, that's what it looks like. Sure. With like it almost like a blue sun, right? Almost like I would say. So it doesn't. We don't really get much of like Solaris. It's the Soderbergh version is much more about like what's happening on the spaceship and about what's happening with Chris himself, with George Clooney's character. And it's almost like a romance in a sense, with her, what's her name?
I don't know who else is in it.
Hari in the original, but I don't remember. I don't think that was her name in the Soderbergh version. But the major difference though is that Tarkovsky takes us through this almost like this moral issue with humanity, a lot more in depth than Soderbergh does. Soderbergh almost like steers away from it. Soderbergh actually. I think I'm not giving him enough credit. He does kind of mention it. He does talk about it a little bit, and it does go into detail a bit. But I feel like it's much more about the inner relationship between these two people. It's more like a second chance for Chris, for Chris's character. Whereas there is that sort of thing happening in the original Solaris, but I feel like Hari's character in the original is so much more developed. I feel like she is the main character in Solaris, because in Tarkovsky's Solaris.
She's now just trying to learn.
Exactly.
It's almost right.
It's sorry, I keep interrupting, but it's almost like I feel like in Tarkovsky's version, he really gives detail and breadth to that character, and almost makes us question, like, what is it to be human? Is it just like once I start having my own emotions? Because at first she doesn't really remember anything. She doesn't have memories, but then she starts to develop these memories from the point where she came into existence, I guess.
Right.
So she herself is like, I'm much more in that scene when they're celebrating Dr. Snout's birthday, and she's kind of going against Sartorius, I think is his name.
Yeah.
Where he kind of says that she's not even real or whatever, and she's like, I'm much more human than you are. You really feel that, like, the emotion coming from that scene.
Yeah.
Whereas in the remake, Chris's wife, the visitor, she is like, she's struggling with it herself, and she's like, I shouldn't be alive and I shouldn't be here and all that stuff. And we see that in Tarkovsky's as well, but in the Clooney version, in the Soderbergh version, I don't know, there's just not as much, like, it just doesn't hit his heart. It's like what you're saying. It's like it's also rushed. Yeah. Like the Soderbergh version is under 2 hours, I believe, and everything happens so much faster. Like there is no. It takes, I think, almost like 40 minutes to get to the station.
Oh boy.
In Tarkovsky's version.
Yeah.
Whereas Soderbergh is we're in the station within like the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, but think about that time spent with Burton and how the people saw him and
totally
time with. If we hadn't had that time with Kelvin's parents or his dad,
his dad and his aunt,
it wouldn't have even developed. Like
that's so true. That's so true. Because I mean, even if you don't see it as well in the beginning, you totally pays off in the end.
Right.
And then the whole thing with it's funny because Tarkovsky also puts so much of himself in his work, with like how he views. Tarkovsky was very in touch with nature, and in every film he's made, as far as I know, he puts that in his film. And in this, it's almost like
he
makes sure to put that in there, and he also puts like his disgust for like the rapid pace of like change in the world, especially with like technology. Like the whole sequence of was it Burton that's driving through the city?
Yeah, and his video callback.
The video callback, but then like we're in Burton's car forever.
Yeah. Well,
and it feels almost like I don't want to be here, and that's exactly what Tarkovsky is trying to like get you to feel.
Well, yeah, and then I start to think like, you know, I read some stuff where there's potential that whole visitors complex and that the way the movie progresses towards the end can start to make us believe that everything that we saw in the beginning could also have been that same concept. Like we see nothing but guests and hosts the entire time. Like Burton's a host, but maybe that boy that's with him is a guest, and he feels just like burdened almost with it. Like we're talking about someone who ventured to Solaris and came back. So why wouldn't that be the case? You know what I mean? So like that's a concept that's out there. But echoing back to what you were saying about Tarkovsky's like self being portrayed in film in his movies, specifically to that nature point, like in this film, that to me is so pronounced, because this versus 2001, it's so much more daunting, that idea, because what he's doing is he's interweaving nature and life to constantly give us as a viewer a reminder that like, hey, these guys are not like it's almost like differentiating for us. Like even if you don't see it that way in the moment, subconsciously you're like, all right, like life on Earth, we're in space in the station, like and even to the point of like that discovery of humanity for Hari's character, and that incorporation of those like classic art pieces, like that one that they zoom into, the originality for that work, where it came from. That whole concept is about a village and the multiple different like tasks and things that people can do in a small township like that. And that the whole idea was the artist for that painting sat up on a hill and he watches the people of his village, the place that he's from do these things, be in relation with each other, be a community. And the position for that film to be directly, or that artwork to be directly in the middle of the film, explaining to us that this character is just striving for humanity, and maybe that's the whole point of the Ocean of Solaris, like they were saying, is like almost like the ex machina effect in a way, like we're going to present these guests, and now the hosts, for lack of a better word, are challenged with the concept of, are these people human or not? Like do they feel the same things? Is this person my ex-wife, or is it just a projection from the ocean planet?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like it's interesting because if you look at the other people on the spaceship other than Kelvin, like Dr. Snout and Dr. Sartorius, they are like, we never see them do this, but it's definitely kind of giving us a glimpse into like what they're doing with their guests, their visitors. Like, for example, we don't see Sartorius's guest. We see him for a second, this is okay. I'll talk about it later. But like he talks about how like he found that the annihilator, right? Like you can annihilate these beings with taking apart their neutrons or whatever it is.
Neutrinos, dude.
Neutrons. Jimmy Neutron. And so by saying that means that he's been doing experiments on his like guests for a long time. Yeah. And he doesn't give a crap. Yeah. Like he has no kind of emotional attachment to his guest, which is curious because we don't really know. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this because we see his guest for a split second.
It just pops out of the little door and pops right back in.
Yeah, it's this dwarf, which it's like, what the hell?
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, it was so David Lynch when I saw that. I was like, what is
definitely,
happening?
Right? Definitely. I was reading about that because I was so confused, like, because I thought for sure we'll hear more about this later.
Dude, pause. When I Googled Solaris, the third like Google suggestion was, what is that little person in Solaris? Go ahead. Sorry.
But in Lem's book, Kelvin, Chris, never sees Sartorius's guest. Instead, he hears like this grunting and like a bunch of crap happening inside of his room, but he never gets a glimpse inside his room, and Chris's imagination makes him believe that it's a dwarf. So we never actually see a dwarf, and it's never presented as it's a dwarf, And so it's interesting that Tarkovsky, it feels almost like unlike Tarkovsky, I feel like, to like give us the viewers like an actual like sighting of this dwarf.
Yeah, but maybe the intentionality was somewhat David Lynch, like to give us like just that kind of disorienting feel.
Yeah, maybe.
Like come on, let's be honest. We watch David Lynch's stuff, and there's some stuff he puts in there 100% just to like
I will never understand
your mind.
Yeah,
just like okay, we're gonna show you this imagery, and now you're never gonna hear or see it again. Like there's literally no point for this.
Yeah. But it's interesting though, because in Soderbergh's version, the same thing happens.
Oh, really?
Sartorius is actually switched out for a female doctor, and her name, I can't remember her name right now, but the same thing. She kind of like, she says, you can't come into my room. And then it's same thing happens. Like there's like something crazy happening inside the room, and there's a bunch of noises, but we never see what's inside. Just don't know.
Interesting.
And she's totally distraught. Like she's depressed, all this stuff. Like she's crazy. And the other thing is that in Snout's version, in Tarkovsky's version, Dr. Snout, like there's even a scene where he's like wrapping his hand in bandage. So like it's all like kind of giving us glimpses into like they're killing their guests every time they come.
Yeah.
They're just like hoping and trying to like have a couple hours of like rest until their guest comes up again, and then they have to kill him again.
Well, yeah, and that's what one of them said when he sent her off in the rocket, was like, "Oh, I see you went with the rocket for the first time."
Yeah. Which makes me think like nobody else had done that yet.
Yeah, exactly. They were just trying to group them all together and get them off in one. Yeah. Yeah, what an aggressive approach.
The rocket, yeah.
Exactly.
It's funny because in Soderbergh the same thing happens, but it's more like a pod. Like he just throws her, not throws her in a pod. He like tricks her into getting into a pod, and then.
Well, I'm sure.
Bye.
I was thinking about that too. Like, one, why is there a rocket on this like space station? But then I realized it's probably the same thing. It's probably like some sort of escape ship.
Yeah.
So that they have
maybe some kind of way to get down to the planet.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Which they do get down to the planet, not those scientists, but the scientists in the beginning. What's his name, Burton?
Yeah, Burton was saying that he was in some sort of shuttle, almost. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he does get down to the planet, which is okay. This is another thing in Soderbergh's version. So Snout's visitor, we never actually see a clear glimpse of him. We see like his ear at one point, which is the first time Chris sees a visitor.
Oh, in the hammock, you're saying?
Yeah, in the hammock.
Yeah.
And we don't know who it is.
He looked like a child, though.
Did it?
Yeah.
I don't remember. In Lem's, I don't remember what Snout's guest was in Lem's novel, but in Soderbergh's version, Snout is now called Snow. It's not Snout.
Okay.
And Snow, his visitor, is himself.
Oh, really?
It's like a doppelganger. So at one point, Snow's visitor comes back to him, and the visitor ends up killing the real Snow.
So then, like, takes his place.
And he doesn't have any more visitors. Like, there's a part where he's like, one day they just stopped coming, but that's because he was the visitor, and now the real one's dead. So
that takes the impact away for me, though. You know what I mean? Like,
it's an interesting thought, and I think it would be cool to have.
Yeah.
But Soderbergh never does anything with it, really.
Yeah. I think we see that too often
really
too, like that intruder concept of like.
I agree.
Even in something like, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but Westworld, for instance, like that whole concept is like we're projecting ourselves as reality, like humanity, but we're actually.
But also, like, I think it takes the mystical element of Solaris a little bit away, because in Solaris it feels like the visitors that come to these people are always people from their past, or people or like something from their imagination. So it feels a little bit weird, like that Snow would have been like imagining himself or like thinking about.
I can kind of understand the concept, because think about like Kelvin's approach to why Hari came back. You know, like he feels like it was somewhat his fault that his wife died. You know, maybe what's his name, Snow. Maybe Snow had that feeling of like he's done something. He's disappointed in himself, and almost like it could be almost like the torture for him would be to That being said, like. It's all just assumption that these guests in Solaris are put there with negative intention, but like,
I don't know that they are. I think it's just like the thing that's closest at the forefront of their mind or their imagination, what they've been like struggling with or something. Because this is another interesting thing. When we see what was his name? What was his name? Dr. Jabarian, I think. Was that it?
Who?
The one that killed himself?
Oh yeah, Gabarian with the G.
Gabarian, there you go. Okay, so Dr. Gabarian in Tarkovsky's version, his visitor is like this young girl, which we don't really have any other clue about. That's all we know. And we know that he killed himself in shame, because Sartorius keeps saying that over and over again, that he killed himself in shame. And eventually I think Chris even mentions it towards the end. So I was reading about him, specifically his character, because when I watched Soderbergh's version, Gabarian's visitor was his son.
Oh, really?
A young son, a young boy. Yeah. And the young boy, I don't know if he had died in Gabarian's past or not, but he was just like so distraught with the fact that his son was on board. It made no sense that he killed himself. But when I read about Lem's version in the novel, Gabarian's visitor was like this how do I say this without sounding weird? Was this African American woman who was scantily dressed.
Oh, scantily clothed?
Scantily, yeah. Is that what
I'm not sure scantily, but scantily is like
Sorry, I'm Brazilian,
No,
every once in a while.
We're both part of the learning process together. I'm teaching you, my friend.
So she's scantily clothed, and so in I was reading an article about it because I didn't understand why there were so many differences with this character. Sorry, I had like mustache hair in my mouth.
Oh boy, yummy.
So apparently it's because of in his imagination, he was like this, almost like a perverted man.
Oh.
And that he was like, he had this like this image in his head. And so that's what showed up in the novel. And then to kind of push the boundaries a little bit more, Tarkovsky makes it like this young girl, like this very young girl. So that's why he's so ashamed. It's because like this young girl is like following him around on this ship, and he has no way to get away from her. And like he's like distraught with shame.
Oh man,
because of what he is, I guess. And that's why he takes his life. But Soderbergh, I guess, was totally like, I'm not putting that in there.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
it just decides to go with his like a young son.
The Lem's novel, the adaptation from 72, right?
Yeah, 72.
He was super disappointed at how it was adapted. But I was reading into it, and apparently there's a ton of people in Soviet era film who adapted Lem's works. And apparently he was just disappointed with all of it. Apparently he was like not one single person could please him. And I guess everyone was saying like,
what a big brain, huh?
that was his stamp, was like, oh, Lem is the guy that like you'll never be able to satisfy. So
that's funny because he was very excited. I read that he was super excited about Soderbergh's version.
Really?
Like he was before his death. I don't know if he actually got around to actually watching it before he died, but he was excited that Soderbergh was making it.
Yeah.
So
maybe he was just disappointed in how it turned out. You know, and maybe his concepts he felt like couldn't have been like adapted to cinema in the 70s, but now he's seeing like the technology of
with technology. Right. Totally. I wonder why that is though, because there's so many stories like that where authors are like, oh, I hated this adaptation. Like Stephen
King.
Stephen King is another one. Like he hated Kubrick's version of The Shining. Like detested with everything inside of him. So like disowned it practically. So like I don't know why. I think as an author, I'm not an author, I'm not a filmmaker, so I can't really
as an author and a filmmaker
anyways.
And a watercolor
but I feel like
artist.
authors have to dissect themselves from their work when it comes to like adaptations, because like you can't put what's on a book page for page in a movie.
Yeah.
It's just impossible.
Yeah, but
the way those two like mediums work are so different.
Yeah, but think about it. Like think about it. We're not filmmakers, but we've made things, right?
Sure.
We've made films, even short films, long films, tiny.
Yeah. Tiny little bitty films.
We were tied to that work regardless. You know what I mean? Like
that's true.
So like think about it. Like he I don't know. It's interesting. I kind of want to read Lem's work because part of me feels like Tarkovsky was taking his humanic approach to it, and maybe Lem's like novel wasn't necessarily that way. Maybe his novel was a little bit more straightforward in the sense of like sci-fi and discovery, whereas I feel like Tarkovsky was more working on us as the audience. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know.
Well, that's another thing too, because apparently Tarkovsky wanted to write almost like an autobiography film, and he wrote a film called, I have it in front of me, A White a Day.
Oh.
And it was rejected because of just like it's the Soviet Union and everything was being what's the word? Dang, here's my Brazilian brain like not letting me like focus on what I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
What's the word? God, when like they're just like censoring. There you go. There was so much censoring happening in the Soviet Union that they didn't want him to make this movie.
Right.
So he decided to write Solaris instead as a sci-fi. It was his first foray into the sci-fi genre because he felt like it would be more accepted. So he did, and he decided to go with Solaris just because he admired Lem's work. So totally, I can see like Tarkovsky being like, okay, I can't put myself in a movie and I can't write about my own stuff. I'm going to take this film that has some elements of like the humanity I want to work with and inject some of myself into that. And I think he did.
Yeah, I do too.
And I think he did, and I think he did a great job. And I think we have to at some point talk about Tarkovsky in a more detailed, especially in the season, because there's so much to dig through here. Especially like we were talking yesterday, like he only made 7 movies, but he also wrote a ton as well before that. So
I think we should, even if it's not so much him specifically, like a literary or like just like classical filmmakers like journey. Anyway, what I said to you yesterday, I stand by. Like seeing Solaris, it makes me question Western cinema completely, and like the concepts and the filmmaking style, everything about it. I feel like I could talk about this forever. Like
same, but just to wrap it up real quick, I think it's so cool that this is only our 2nd season and this is our 3rd episode for this season. I believe
so, yeah.
And we have already talked about the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Like we already talked about Kubrick, Tarkovsky now, and we even mentioned Kurosawa.
Right, exactly.
Also, before we wrap it up, I did want to mention that like this is a space movie, and again, in space, no one can hear you scream.
Right, exactly. We're gonna see that come to the forefront in the next episode for sure. Yeah, for sure. Well, Solaris, that is A++ in my book. Absolute.
Fantastic.
Darling child of the cinematic universe, like one of the best things I've ever seen. So totally. Like if you guys feel the same way, join in the conversation, like jump on our social media 2_35 media on Instagram, comment us. We've got a link in our bio there. You can jump onto our Anchor page and check out all of that stuff. And we just want you guys to be a part of the conversation. J-Bob, add anything to that?
Yeah, if you guys have something to say, drop it down in the comments below, or you can send us like an Anchor message on Anchor. And we're really enjoying this season. I love the season so far, and I can't wait to get to the next ones. Next week is Alien, and I'm really excited for that. So
it's gonna be
awesome. Let's do it.